Shaun Arora, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you, John.
It is a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Canada. I am in the US, south of Salt Lake City in Utah. Today, we're going to be talking about neurodiversity in the workplace, uh, challenges there, what companies are getting right, what they're getting wrong about neurodiversity, and really what we can do better to improve uh, the context, the situation for neurodiverse individuals in the workplace, and how neurotypical individuals can be better supporters of neurodiverse individuals in the workplace. As we get started, I wanted to share Shaun's bio with everybody. Shaun Arora seeks opportunities in the margins. As a coach, he propels leaders and their teams to thrive. Emerging leaders, founders, and technologists seek out Shaun's lens to explore nonlinear pathways for reducing daily frictions as they grow their companies and their teams. While working within organizations as a coach, advisor, and COO, he has built the infrastructure and workflows that transform a company's neurodiversity into a strength and an asset. And I really love everything about that. And it really, I truly believe neurodiversity can and should become a strength and an asset to any organization who's thoughtful and intentional about their approach. So I'm excited to explore how organizations can go about doing this within their organizations. Before we dive on in, anything you would like to share with the audience by way of your own background, personal context?
Um, I'm happy to just jump right in. But uh, I guess I could share a little bit of how I got into this work. Maybe that'll be helpful. I
Yeah,
had a
yeah.
Sure. Okay. I had a diagnosis in my 40s, and um, in those moments, I realized lots of things. It's like a comedian once said, getting your neurodivergent diagnosis is like having one of the best horoscopes ever. It's just incredibly accurate. Like all these things just kind of fall into place. And it felt like that for a while. And then
Mm,
the more I dived in, the more I saw there's so much nuance in there. And one of the areas of nuance was how people reacted to it. So with my team, I shared, hey, by the way, I have this diagnosis. And the next question was, okay, what does that mean? How does that impact the way we work? And I would say, well, this would be helpful if you could do this. If you catch me doing this, I don't want to do that anymore. So just call me out on these things. And it worked. My team reacted really well and we performed much higher because of that. And when I talk to other people, they don't have that same type of experience. There's a lot of companies out there where that's more the exception. That's not the norm. And for my son, when he received his diagnoses, it was definitely the exception. His school was not prepared for handling any type of neurodivergence. They are barely up to speed on accommodations. And so um, it just really got to me that there's so many people in the world that do not understand how to do this. And how do companies, how do people, schools, institutions figure this out?
yeah, yeah. And you mentioned, your diagnosis in your 40s, your son's diagnosis as a child. Certainly things have changed a lot, over the decades, and we're in a different place today than we were, even a couple of decades ago. So hopefully things have improved. But you just mentioned how, things actually were better for you in your workplace than they were for your son at his school. So maybe diagnoses have gotten better, or maybe we are catching things earlier, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the way we approach it, the way accommodations are dealt with, the way organizations are able to handle them, that all is actually any better than it was, previously. And so I just want to point that out, like just to reiterate that it doesn't necessarily mean that things are better today
Can we
because
double click on that?
yeah, please.
Yeah. In fact, I've been thinking about this a lot recently because in some ways it isn't better. In some ways it is. But in the ways that's not better is um, a company might have a neurodiversity awareness week, a neurodiversity awareness
Yeah,
month program. And when you do that, you're creating the expectation that you're going to do some of the things that you say during that week.
right.
And when you don't follow through, all of a sudden you have these people who's like, oh my God, I had this opportunity to represent more of who I am and to feel more included. I could ask for accommodations. And these companies lack the infrastructure to support that. And
Yeah.
so I feel like a lot of companies are just set up to fail because they feel the pressure to do it from a marketing standpoint, from a HR standpoint, and then they don't back it up with the actual workflows and processes inside. It feels like also language is really tricky. And if you follow LinkedIn, there's just all these influencers that are saying, you have to say this, you can't say that. And hear from a lot of managers like, just tell me what to say. I can't keep up with this. I read this book 2 years ago, and already people are saying it's outdated, and I can't do what's in that book. So it's just really hard on managers and companies to handle neurodiversity.
Yeah, so there's the whiplash effect of just how things are changing, the language changing, but also, like you said, companies, let's just assume that companies and leaders are well-intentioned, right? So they're having a campaign, they're trying to do and say the right things, but then they don't, like you said, like the systems, the infrastructure, like all of that isn't there to actually support everything they're saying. So they're talking the talk, but they can't walk the walk. Let's assume their intentions are real though, like they're good intentions. Um, just because their intentions are good though, that's not enough. Like you have to actually be able to do it. And so then you have the whiplash from that. Like people are feeling supported, they feel the warm fuzzies, they feel good about like how the messaging is. And then in the real lived experience, the day to day, they don't see it, they don't feel it. And then that whiplash happens and then they feel like the rug is pulled out from under them. And that's really hard. In some cases, that's almost worse, right? Than just feeling like, okay, I'm gonna, I know what I need to do to make it work for me and my team and with my boss and my organization. And so yeah, it's just really hard. And I know it's hard for neurodivergent individuals. I know it's hard for leaders who may have every good intention in the world to want to be supportive and accommodating. They don't know how. They don't have the supports, the infrastructure to help them to do it effectively. And everyone seems to be kind of caught in this difficult space. Another thing you mentioned, with your own diagnosis, you're fortunate enough to be able to go back to your team, to have like open dialogue, to be able to explore like, this is what works for me, this is what doesn't work for me, and to have a supportive team. It doesn't always work that way either, though. Like sometimes, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit, sometimes there's just really the stigma that is attached to a diagnosis, which is also why, and some of the research that I've done, shows the massive underreporting. Like it's self-reported, right? So you have to be able to go into your organization and self-report that you have a diagnosis. And most people don't. Most people go into their organizations, they never self-report that they have a diagnosis. And then you ask, well, why? Why wouldn't they report? Well, it's because of the stigma, right? There's oftentimes a bit of a backlash uh, and a stigma attached to these sorts of diagnoses that can potentially hurt somebody, or at least it's perceived, that it'll hurt them in their career, in their progression in the organization, and their ability to get good assignments and all of these sorts of things. And again, I guess ultimately, whether it's real or perceived, it still has the negative impact. And so that's a really hard nut to crack as well.
Yeah, it's real. Most people who do disclose, ends up going badly, and there's a reason why people have stopped disclosing.
Yeah.
That's going to change in the very near future. With Gen Z, we see that 53% of Gen Z are very happy to disclose that they're neurodivergent in the education setting. Once they get to the workplace, I mean, we see those numbers go from 50% all the way down to close to like 5% or less. Um, Luckily, there's mandates to get it like above 5%, but in most workplaces without the mandates, you're in like the 2 to 5% range. So people are really not disclosing. And that is after the hurdles to even get a diagnosis, which is pretty difficult for most people to do. So imagine getting the diagnosis, going through all that effort, and then saying, you know what, I still don't feel safe. I feel like it's going to go badly for me. I feel like there's going to be retaliation. I feel like the company's not going to support me. So just a lot of people don't do it, and which is why I'm working on this book right now called Work Trades. I really want to shift the language because I can't expect my boss to understand everything about a medical diagnosis. I can't expect them to have a PhD in psychology. So, what is a more workplace friendly way to talk about it? If I say I have autism, you met one person with autism, you met one person with autism, and people just don't know how that manifests. So, most chief people officers I speak to say, the next question is, what has worked for you in the past? What could I do to support you? Like, what are some of the traits that play out in work that we need to be aware of? What kind of accommodations would you want? Those are the questions that we're having. The diagnosis right now is a ticket to that conversation, but does it have to be? Can't you just have a conversation? Hey,
Mm.
this is my trait. You know what? I need this certain thing because of this trait that I have at work. And this will be very helpful. Is this something that the company is willing to provide? Even better if the company says, hey, we're able to provide all these things. Here's the buffet. Just pick what you want. And that would be ideal where you reduce the barrier for disclosure as well, where people could just anonymously go and grab whatever resources they need without any sense of stigma or retaliation.
Yeah, so you're advocating for, a buffet of accommodations without any disclosure, without any self-disclosure. Is that right?
Well, I think I wouldn't say I'm advocating for the buffet. I'm advocating for us to shift the language so that we don't even have to worry about disclosure.
Mm,
The buffet comes with a cost. If
sure.
you have an
Yeah.
all-you-can-eat buffet, you got to be able to afford it. So not every company could do the buffet, but every company could start to have a conversation where you don't force someone to disclose medical information, where you could actually have a conversation more about the actual work traits instead of the medical label.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I agree. I think anytime you have these friction points, anytime you have these barriers towards inclusion, where people have to like opt in to find ways to be included, uh, yeah, you're just going to have you're going to have people not, and you're going to have pain points, and you're going to have the types of challenges that we're seeing. And so I think your example of like Gen Z students going into the workplace and self-disclosure going from 50% down to, single digits is dramatic. And that's the kind of thing we have to pay super close attention to. Um, of course, cost is something every business is going to be paying attention to. Anyone in the HR space who's paying attention to this conversation today, they go back to work and they're thinking, okay, what are we going to do? We have to manage costs, but we want to have an inclusive workspace. Like what would you suggest to any of them on what they could start doing, like cost effectively, cheap in a cheap way to start to move the needle and make, a more neuro-inclusive space right away.
Yeah, so most accommodations cost nothing. It's more
Mm.
of a mindset shift. It's some of the stuff out there cost like $500, which is a lot less than losing good talent. So if you spend a lot of money and time and energy trying to recruit talent, and then on day one you say, "Hey, we just spent the past 3 months recruiting you. We just paid a recruiter, and by the way, we actually don't care about your feelings or your. We don't want you to be productive. We want to bring you in, but hamstring you, handicap you." To do your job. So, for example, there was this person I was talking to just a couple of days ago who said that he was allowed to work from home, where he was incredibly productive. He had a door to his office. He could shut it out. But when he came into the office, all the remote workers, or the hybrid workers were given a cubicle, not an office. So you have all these engineers who are full-time that got the office, and all these engineers who are full-time but just happened to be hybrid got a cubicle and they were less productive. Why? Why would you try to save money on that one office and lose out on the productivity? That person left after 2 years. He was like, I just can't do that. And I can't be full time for whatever reason he had. He had caretaking duties that he had to handle. So he couldn't be in the office. And the company just said, hey, you come in, you need to be in the cubicle, not in the office. So it's just a different way of thinking about these things. It's being less of a penny pitcher in so many things. This one, all right. There's just so many bad examples of penny pitching. Like this person was on disability and really want to get off disability and want to come back to work and said, "Oh, by the way, I just need the subscription to Microsoft Copilot." And they're like, "No, we're not going to give you a subscription to Microsoft Copilot. We'd rather you quit." Like, really? Like, I am a senior level person. Like, it's going to cost a lot to replace me. It's like, yeah, but we don't want to spend money on this because it's going to set a precedent for everyone else in the company. Like, really?
And what's Copilot? What is that, $30 a month or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, and it is insane. And like, companies, I mean, for any position at any given point in time, they're putting a lot of money into recruiting, into onboarding, into ongoing training, like for any position, right? But especially, for top level positions, and especially for more diverse hires, companies, are putting a lot of resources into getting folks into the room. Like they want diverse hires. They understand, I think most companies understand the value of having diverse hires. But the problem is just getting the person in the room isn't enough. Like once they get to the room, they have to feel like they're actually valued there. Like they have to feel needed, wanted, valued, like they have an opportunity to contribute. They have to feel supported. And so you spend all this energy, all this time, all this money to get this person there. And then all of a sudden they get there and they're like, maybe it was a bait and switch. Maybe they were told it's going to be super supportive and inclusive, and they get there and it's not, or whatever. And they just get there, and then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I'm out. Like they might stick around for 6 months or a year, but then they're gone. And like all of that effort is just wasted, and it's usually super expensive. Usually
yeah,
super expensive, and it really does just blow my mind how companies will fall into that trap again and again and again when it really is one of their stated goals, one of their values. Like they want this. At least they say they want this.
yeah,
And it doesn't even from a business case, it doesn't make any sense. Like they say they want to save money. It doesn't make sense. If that's your goal, like it doesn't make sense, like on any level. And so it's like it's this short-termism. That's really what it comes down to. It's a short-termism perspective and like a bottom line short-term perspective versus, really taking a good look at like what your values are, what your goals are, and even just like a medium term, like having a medium term perspective on like what your bottom line results could be based on, how you approach these types of situations. And yeah, and again, I feel for middle management, for leaders, frontline leaders who often get kind of trapped in the system, of all of this churn, because I think a lot of times they see how ridiculous it is. They see how, they get equally as frustrated by it, but then they kind of feel stuck too.
yeah.
Man,
And
we
John, that
we
makes
we sure can do better though.
Yeah, and John, that makes me think about like the top down approach. I'm wondering in your experience, how often is this the case where there is a senior leader above the managers who does have a diagnosis that has is out in the open that has disclosed it? Because I'm sure most leadership teams have somebody who's neurodivergent, whether they disclose or not.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of one individual specifically in my own experience who he did not disclose
Mhm.
until he left the organization. And then it kind of became a big deal, and he went to a different organization, high profile. And then he kind of had like a big magazine spread, and it like kind of became this big thing. And he disclosed, like, I'm neurodivergent, and he had it was a big thing, and I once he disclosed, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see these things, um, and then but I'm wondering, like, I worked with him for 12 years, like, why did he never disclose? Like, why did he never just open up to people? I suppose people that were really close to him probably knew. And in retrospect, I could see, but why didn't he? And I'm sure it was because of the culture of the organization, right? Like in the
Mhm.
new place that he felt that he could. And in the place where we had been together, he felt like he couldn't, that it would hurt him, right? I
Yeah.
can't think of another reason why it would have been that way.
Mhm.
And so I'm sure it's going to depend. I'm sure for every situation, there's going to be a unique context and, situational analysis of like when people feel safe and when they don't feel safe and whatever. But I just find it so unfortunate that people have to even go through that calculus, in their mind of like, can I afford to do this with my career? Can I, am I going to be stunted? Am I going to be stigmatized? Am I going to, are people going to come up with a convenient excuse to let me go or to like give the promotion to somebody else or to like whatever, right? And it certainly could have happened to this person.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I was just looking at my list of four reasons why people don't disclose. The workplace is not psychologically safe. Some employees have well-established coping mechanisms, so they just power through it. They don't see
Yeah.
the obvious benefits, or they've observed or experienced downsides of speaking up. And as you're talking, it makes me think about how many people in the pre-Me Too movement did not speak up
Yeah.
about all the stuff that was going on. It was a very similar type of situation where they didn't feel psychologically safe, where losing that job meant a lot. And one of my friends said, "Hey, I know what's happening at work. You know what's happening at work. Let's all find other jobs before we actually report anything."
Mm.
And everything was kind of sliding under the rug, unfortunately, because there's just so many reasons why people choose not to disclose.
Yeah, and the coping mechanisms piece, the neurotypical kind of presenting um, individual, like this person definitely had lots of coping mechanisms, and I think a lot of neurodiverse individuals have lots, like often have lots of coping mechanisms. They have had to navigate through life, right? And this individual certainly did have lots of coping mechanisms and had been able to navigate and ultimately had he knew he had the coping mechanisms. He had clearly done the calculus and decided it made more sense to just lean on the coping mechanisms and not, have to deal with the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it
And
really
I
is
know that
tragic.
yeah, and I know that the DI movement got in a lot of trouble over having representation, but having representation at the top makes such a huge difference.
It
And I've seen in
does.
so many situations where as soon as a senior leader says, "Hey, I have an ADHD diagnosis," they become a safe space. Other people come to them and say, "Hey, I also have a diagnosis, and how are you managing? And can you advocate for me?" It's just so freeing when you do have that ability to have top-down disclosure and to start to build that into the culture. And that's free. That is dirt cheap. A senior leader who's not going to get fired could all of a sudden provide the safety that's needed in an organization.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and one of the things that you shared, is just and it's completely free, is to just like have the space to have the conversations, like have the open conversation. How do I work best? Right? That
Yeah.
that is something everyone can do. And frankly, like that's just good leadership. Like that's what every leader should be doing with their people. Like if I'm managing anybody, I should be sitting down with them and having an open conversation about like how do you work best? How can I support you in that? Like, how do you like to be led? How can I, mentor you and coach you and lead you in a way that's going to support you best and help you to do your best work and help you to thrive? And, like that is just like leadership 101. So if anyone wants to just be a good leader, you should be doing that anyways. And it doesn't matter if they're neurotypical, neurodiverse, or whatever. Like that is just the conversation you should be having already. Anyways, it's completely free and it will just help you have a better relationship with the people you work with anyways. And it just so happens that if you are working with someone who's neurodiverse, that it'll open the door for a very, very important conversation that they hopefully will feel safe to share with you the things that they do need. Just like anyone else hopefully would share, how they would best work and be most effective.
Yeah, and if you have a culture where that sharing is happening naturally, it's amazing. But it's easier said than done. I've worked with so many leaders who just they don't have those guides or they don't share those guides. And I know other organizations where they actually proactively do that. I was talking to this one CHRO, and she said, whenever I have two people in conflict, I go to them and say, "Hey, have you looked at this other person's guide?" And they're like, "No." It's like, "All right, how about the two of you go look at each other's guide? And if you still have a conflict, come back to me." And they don't come back. They're like, "Oh, I understand more of what's going on. Like, I'm not taking this personally anymore. We just have different ways of working." And so yeah, when you start having conversations about the traits, the different ways of working, it's just much easier. And so, in
Yeah,
order to help leaders actually build those guides, I built something using Claude. It's called Work Traits. You go to worktraits.ai and basically answer a bunch of prompts, and it pulls up a guide, and it's all free. Like this should be easier. It's not easy enough. This gets you maybe 50%, 60% there. At least it's better than nothing. And then you can work with people like you and I to like just round it out.
I love it. I love it. Well, Shaun, this has just been a fantastic conversation. I know we've only scratched the surface. There's a whole lot more to dig into around the topic of neurodiversity at work. But I think this is a good starting point. And um, I know at the time I do need to let you go, but as we wrap things up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word for today.
All right, sure. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. My website is my3rocks, all spelled out, .co. And then that tool to make your guide is worktraits.ai. So all those are out there. And yeah, I just really appreciate the time. I love sharing what I'm working on. And um, yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Shaun can do for you. Check out the websites, the resources. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe. They can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.